In the dead of winter, behind shuttered windows and whispering stone, the most feared king in English history began to rot alive, his flesh split with fever, his breath a cannon's echo. And across the frost-laced courtyards of Sion and Whitehall servants held their tongues, not in mourning, but in terror, once a lion in flesh, and will now a swollen shadow, wrapped in fur and incense, waiting for death to find the courage to enter. This is how Henry VIII died. In the breathless black before dawn, Hampton Court does not sleep, it waits. The palace, once pulsing with masks and minstrels, now exhales fog from its moss-darkened stones, like an old beast too tired to growl. Frost creeps over window pane, etching veined lace across leaded glass, as if the building itself were trying to forget what it has witnessed. Somewhere deep in the inner walls, a pipe moans with the cold, and rats gnaw in the floor beneath rushes once golden with feast crumbs. A lone watchman passes beneath the Queen's gate. His lantern jerks in rhythm with his step, casting nervous shadows across the snow-dusted tiles. The wind is low, but constant, whispering through arrow loops like a choir of broken flutes. His hood is pulled tight, not just against the cold, but against what he might hear if he listens too long. At his side, a bell rope swings without touch, clinking softly against a pillar. A Vespers bell with no priest to summon inside. Beyond thick doors, warped by centuries of ceremony, a chamber flickers with dying light. Tapestries of conquest hang limp on the wall scenes of Agincourt, of glory stitched by noble women now long dead, but their silken threads cannot hide the smell. Beneath the scent of cedarwood and sweet myrrh, rot blooms, thick, sour, like wet iron. It clings to everything. The king is dying. Henry lies swollen, pinned by his own weight into a bed fit for a god. Pillows cradle his crownless head, but they cannot lift him. He wheezes through cracked lips, each breath bubbling at the edges. His left leg, once used to drive steel into French earth, now festers beneath linen bandages, soaked in vinegar, oozing yellow. It is said he smells of carrion, that even the dogs refuse to enter his room. Around him, physicians whisper behind velvet sleeves. They trade leeches like relics, speak in Latin, argue over humours and the bile of saints. One drops a sprig of rosemary into a brazier, but the smoke does nothing. The smell persists. It lingers like memory. The Lord Chancellor leans in, murmuring lines from the third act of Succession, but even his voice falters, unsure if it is treason to speak of a future the king may not be part of. Outside the chamber, a scribe clutches a quill above a blank page. He waits. He watches the door. The line between life and legacy has thinned, and ink must be ready the moment breath is not. Henry stirs. His eyes flutter, white with fever, lashes damp with sweat. Perhaps he sees the face of God. Perhaps he sees the field of the cloth of gold, his youth, his pride, the silk tents that shimmered like heaven in the French light. Perhaps he sees Catherine, her lips set in prayer, or Anne, with her black eyes and ruined crown. Or maybe he sees nothing but fire, fire and war, and wives left behind like chess pieces swept from the board. He opens his mouth, but no words come, just a grunt, a noise, somewhere between pain and command. The hearth crackles in answer, spitting a bright tongue of flame before collapsing inward, as if ashamed. A servant, one of few who dares remain, approaches with trembling hands. She adjusts the king's blanket. She does not speak. She remembers the day she first served him, when he strode through the great hall, golden like a lion, laughter in his voice and power in his gait. That man is gone. This thing in the bed, bloated and broken, is not what the kingdom was taught to love, but still. She tucks the covers tighter outside. The first stain of dawn bleeds across the shutters. Thin, grey-pink light edges into the room, washing over tapestries, over gilt candlesticks, over a face that once terrified nations. A falcon shrieks above the battlements, sharp, wild, metallic. Its cry cuts through the air like judgment. The king's eyelids flutter again. He hears it. His body, ruined though it is, remembers that sound. He once kept falcons, fed them by hand, let them perch on his fist in the hunting fields of Kent, where the wind smelled of heather and blood. That cry, now, is no memory. It is a messenger, a herald circling a sinking sun. The king tries to lift his hand. It barely stirs. Beneath the linen, his fingers twitch. Not toward a sword, not toward scripture, but toward the candle, the single flame that has stood vigil beside him all night. It gutters the wax, softened from hours of heat, droops in one long tear down the brass. Then the flame flickers, pulls inward like a breath, and dies. A whisper, a farewell, nothing more. Silence returns. Outside the chamber, the corridor seems to stretch. Shadows lengthen as though time itself is bending. The stone floor walked by cardinals, queens, and spies now feels like a nave, empty and waiting. A church without sermon, a tomb before burial. But the door does not open. No mourner enters. The king is not yet dead. He breathes, barely, and, with each rattling breath, a kingdom waits, not in prayer, but in calculation, for what comes next, for who will rise, for what the crown will cost this time. There are no trumpets, no choir, no angels breaking through the ceiling, just the slow drip of water down a gutter, the creak of old wood beneath winter's weight. And in some distant room, a pen scratches on parchment, a name. A plan. History does not pause for the dying. It only leans forward, and soon it will take its next step into the cold, into the silence, into the gathering dark. Snow drifts through the courtyard at Whitehall like torn pages from a forgotten gospel. Each flake settles softly upon the stone, blanketing the prints of horses and boots that led men away in silence. Courtiers, lords, secretaries, all vanished to country estates, or to safer fires, leaving only wind and memory to fill the halls. Winter has claimed the palace, not with fury, but with indifference, cold, slow, and patient. The river groans beneath its blackened crust. The Thames, once a ribbon of power feeding London's heart, now murmurs beneath ice, sluggish and secretive. It carries no royal barge, no song of oars, just the low sound of moving water under frost, a reminder that even the oldest arteries can freeze. Inside the presence chamber, the banners of St. George hang limp in stale air. His sword, once radiant with thread of gold, looks dulled. Now, as if wearied by the blood it symbolized. Candle smoke lingers like fog across the vaulted ceiling, yellowing the saints, softening their faces. There is no audience today, no fanfare, only a spaniel scratching at the sealed oak doors, whimpering at a scent it cannot name, pawing at a silence it cannot break. 1,000 nights of masque and madrigal once pulsed through this room, wine, spilled on Russia's laughter echoing through galleries, hands pressed to sleeves in courtly pursuit. But those echoes are dust now. The walls have grown tired, and beneath them a queen kneels, Catherine Parr, 6th wife, final wife. Quiet widow, waiting. She kneels alone in the antechamber, shrouded in damask and fennel smoke. The small altar before her is draped in red, not for martyrdom, but for discretion. Her rosary beads slide between her fingers like droplets of blood. She dare not show them by daylight. Even prayer is dangerous now. Reformers pace the upper corridors. Their eyes are sharp, their doctrines sharper. Every whisper carries risk. The room smells of rosemary, sweat, and fading perfume. Above her, the ceiling creaks, carved oak groaning under winter's weight. Somewhere behind the paneling, a clock ticks with the rhythm of a dying heart. But there is no scepter striking the floor, no command to rise, no new decree of coinage or confession, only silence, and the occasional cough of the royal astrologer who waits beside faded charts, mapping constellations that offer no prophecy. Catherine listens, though she does not know what for. Perhaps for news of the king, whether he stirs or bleeds or stops breathing altogether. Or perhaps she listens for a voice deeper than any human sound, something divine, something forgiving. In the outer corridor, the surgeons debate. The king's leg, swollen and weeping, has resisted all poultices. They stir sheep's marrow into hot wine, mixing it with powdered bone, murmuring of leeches and fire. One holds iron tongs, shaped like the nails of Christ, in trembling hands, unsure whether to press or pray. Nearby, a clerk unrolls a sheaf of vellum, ink running where candle wax has melted. He writes inventory of a ransacked monastery, chalices, altar cloths, relics. The list is long. Blood money in script. Catherine knows the stories of relics, the fingers of saints, the bones of martyrs. She wonders, briefly, whether anyone will keep a piece of Henry when he is gone. A tooth, a lock of hair, a king's thigh bone, wrapped in silk, held up as a talisman. She banishes the thought, but it lingers. The day dims. Through the latticework, windows, dusk enters like a thief, brushing shadows over floorboards that once knew the step of Erasmus, Cromwell, and Wolsey. Light pools across the altar, then fades, then returns again. Fractured through the stained glass above the chapel royal dot, then the bell tolls. Its voice is wrong. Not the clean bronze note of sacred order, but a warped, groaning clang. The frost has gripped the ropes, stiffened the clapper. It shudders once, then stops, then rings again, off-key, discordant, as if unsure whether to announce death or warning. The sound rolls across the cloisters, finding every listening ear. Catherine's fingers stop. Her rosary halts on the skull bead, carved ivory its grin worn smooth by sleepless nights. She lifts it to her lips. Salt flesh, cold, the echo of the bell lingers. It does not bring comfort. It does not bring priests or answers or angels. It brings only a reminder that some nights' prayers go unheard, that doors remain closed, that faith, even when whispered with trembling devotion, may not be enough to stop the rot behind the throne. Outside, the wind rises. The snow falls again, coating the hooves of an idle warhorse in the stables. A groom murmurs a psalm, unsure for whom. A falcon shrieks once, distant. The frost creeps farther down the windows. The fire dims in the queen's antechamber. She does not rise. She stays where she is, head bowed, breath shallow, as if afraid her body might make too much sound. She knows what comes next, not the exact hour, nor the manner, but she knows. The candle beside her flutters, not with breeze, but with the tremble of uncertain flame, and then it steadies, somewhere beneath her kneeling form, beneath the floorboards and stone, beneath the vaults and ribs of this groaning palace. A king still breathes, but the breath is thin, weaker now than ever before, and so she waits, not as queen, not as wife, but as witness to a world ending quietly, in salted prayers and cracked bells and snow that will not melt. Rain drags its fingers down the walls of Windsor like ink from a broken quill. Each drop traces black veins across the castle's lime-washed skin, as if the old stones themselves were weeping. The wind claws at the ramparts with salt-tipped nails, howling through arrow loops and chimneys, scouring the years from every corner. In the west courtyard, torches hiss beneath the storm's breath, their flames twisting and stuttering, throwing shadows across puddled cobbles and pale faces. The sentries lean into the wind, armor slick with rain and dread. They whisper beneath, their visors not of the king's leg or his failing lungs, but of banners stirring along the Welsh marches, of names once exiled, now spoken in firelight, of the silence from Ireland and the coin sent north. They do not speak loudly. Storms carry secrets, and even stone walls have ears. Inside the royal chambers, the air is thick with damp wool, clove, and damp powder. A fire coughs in the hearth, but gives little heat, the smoke curling around the beams like a trapped soul, looking for a way out. The king sits slumped upon a velvet chair draped in sable, his body heavy, bowed, and stinking. The wound on his leg festers beneath layered linen, its smell no longer shocking, merely expected. Brother Anthony kneels before him, face lined by years of fasting and silence, hands stained with marigold oil and ointment. He chants in his native low country tongue, the psalms cracked and fading, more lullaby than blessing now. He presses warm cloth against the ulcer, muttering names of saints who never walked these halls. His voice trembles, not from fear, but exhaustion, the kind born from too many nights spent holding dying hands. Henry's fingers twitch. The sword across his lap, once the blade of conquest, paraded at Boulogne, polished to a mirror sheen, now lies cold and silent. Frost clings to the pommel. He tries to lift it, to feel its weight, but his hands have forgotten strength. The steel does not rise. It remains, like regret, unmovable and sharp in all the wrong places. Through the thick drapes of rain, the bell of St. George's Chapel tolls once. Then again, the sound rolls like thunder through the bones of the keep, not in mourning, not yet, but in counting, breath by breath, hour by hour. The bell does not call the faithful. It marks the slow extinguishing of a king's presence. Each toll is a thread cut loose, winding toward silence. In the library above the hall, two astrologers argue by candlelight, their beards tangled with soot and their robes streaked with ink. They trace trembling fingers across star maps smeared with wax. Mars leans too close to Saturn, they say, a conjunction of ill omen. One mutters that the last time these planets danced so near, a pope died, screaming. The other nods, eyes hollow. Below, Lady Mary sits in a chamber of tapestries and shadows. The pages of her mother's psalter crackle as she turns them with gloved fingers, each page stiff with age and salt. She does not pray, not aloud. She merely reads the margins, the faded notes in Catherine's hand, and stares at the names that have vanished from the line of succession. She remembers the smell of her mother's tomb. She remembers what was taken. The king stirs again, not in pain, but in memory. In his mind, he sees Greenwich, sun-drenched and echoing with drums, lances crashing in the tilt-yard. He sees himself golden, laughing, a lion with no shadow, the crowd roaring his name. Anne at the railings, Jane beneath a parasol. But the faces slip, change, distort. The roar becomes wind, the trumpets become thunder, the saddle becomes this chair, and then silence. The storm pauses. The rain stills for the briefest breath, as if the world holds itself on the edge of something final. A rook lands on the round tower. Its wings are soaked, charcoal dripping, beak curved like a question never asked. It shakes the storm from its feathers, then cries once, sharply, a sound jagged as broken iron. Inside the chamber, Henry flinches. The cry drills into his skull like a blade. He thinks it is Gabriel's horn. He thinks it is time. He rises, or tries to. His legs buckle. The wound tears open. The linen soaks red once more. He collapses forward, striking the arm of the chair, gasping, choking on a name no one will hear. Blood spatters across the tiled floor. Brother Anthony lunges to catch him, but the king is too heavy, too broken. The sword slips from his lap, clanging dully as it lands beside the marigold bowl, now overturned. Candlelight flickers. The rook's shadow stretches along the chamber wall, monstrous and winged, cast large by fate and flame. It hovers. Above the king's still form, a silhouette of judgment, of passage, of something ancient arriving at last. Brother Anthony kneels again. He presses the cloth tighter, whispering not in Latin, but in Flemish. Voice cracked by fear. In the corridor, a servant drops a basin and runs above. The astrologers fall silent. Lady, Mary closes the book. The wind returns, not as storm, but as whisper. It moves through Windsor's halls like a sigh too, large for breath. The rook takes flight. The shadow lingers, but the man remains, not dead, not yet, just closer, closer now to the next hour, the next name, the next silence. The history will learn to whisper. January arrives without mercy. It does not gallop, nor roar, it seeps. A reluctant dawn spills over. The palace of Placentia in bruised hues of lavender and lead, as if the sky itself bears the swelling of a kingdom's infection. The river groans beneath panes of black ice, ferrying debris from upstream waterlogged timber, hollow barrels, the occasional carcass of a drowned calf, and as the logs strike the pilings of the ferry docks, they drum softly like hearts that beat beneath too many layers of cloth. Inside, the hearth's protest. Rain-soaked logs spit and sizzle, sending up desperate smoke laced with vinegar and crushed juniper, a scent once used to ward off plague, now clinging to velvet hangings and fur-lined sleeves like incense in a crypt. The walls remember joy. They remember the Feast of Epiphany, the Queen's coronation, the field of cloth of gold, still emblazoned in silk upon a great tapestry near the east windows. But the colours have faded, dulled by soot and candle smoke, and each ripple in the fabric is a breath, a sigh, as if it mourns the man who once strode beneath banners of France and England. Stitched together like a prayer, that man is gone in a private chamber panelled with black oak, a room too narrow for the weight it holds. Henry breathes through a reed tube. The hiss of his inhale is thin, mechanical, the stench unavoidable. Sweet rot mingled with blood and damp wool. The linen that wraps his leg must be changed twice, daily. The flesh beneath weeps, not with pain, but with memory, the memory of armour, of hunts, of a time when his stride could silence a court. The apothecaries work in grim silence. One grinds pearls into dust, mixing them with rosewater and crushed garnet, whispering to no one. The other cleans the silver tongs, heating them in the coals until they glow like dragon's breath. Behind them, a surgeon waits with tallow candles. An iron forceps, every cough from the king is met with a pause. Not of fear, but of calculation. How many breaths remain? Between gasps, the king dictates. His voice is thin now, yet still heavy with command. Names fall from his lips like stones. Into a dark well, duchies reassigned, debts erased, dowries recalculated. Each clause is a tether, a desperate attempt to bind the future into order before the present rots away entirely. He speaks not of love, nor sorrow, nor repentance, only weight, inheritance. Who will wear which ring? Who will be made to kneel? A clerk scratches with a quill, ink pooling at the edge of each letter. No one dares interrupt. These words are not for the living, they are for the void. Outside the chamber, the palace moves quietly. Servants drift like ghosts through the misericord-lined corridors, carrying lavender water, fresh bolts of linen, and the latest rumors. They walk softly, they speak softer. One whispers that an alchemist in Deptford claims he can turn pus to gold. Another says a Flemish envoy has begun wagering on the exact hour Prince Edward will be summoned to Westminster. A boy king in waiting, unknowing. Another shadow waiting to form. Through cracked windows, the air bites, the Thames, swollen and strange, carries ice like blades down its back. The tide shifts slower now, as if unsure of where to go. Beneath the bridge, ferrymen wait in silence, cloaks wrapped tight. They do not look toward the palace. They know what death smells like, and it is in the wind. Back in the king's chamber, the room grows darker. A cloud passes. The stained glass archangel above the hearth catches what little light remains and fractures it across the walls. Cobalt and crimson spill downward, blade-shaped, until one lands squarely across the king's chest. For a moment, just a moment, the old Henry returns, crowned in coloured fire, a lion haloed in sapphire and blood. He turns his head slightly, as if to see it. He does not speak. Then the gust comes. The wind presses hard against the glass, and the light shatters. The beam collapses into fragments, no longer regal, just shards on cold flagstone. The crown of light is gone. No choir, no thunder, just a rustle. The colours flicker once, then fade, and in their absence the dusk settles, not like night, but like forgetting. The surgeon sets down his tongs. The apothecary gathers the pearls that remain unpowdered. The clerk wipes a blot of ink from his thumb, and Henry simply lies there. His chest rises again, just barely. Another breath, another. Ghost dot, no cries, no screams, no saints descending. Just the slow, relentless pull of shadow through the rafters in a distant part of the palace. A child's laughter echoes, sudden, high, out of place. Then silence, then footsteps, then nothing. This is how legacies end, not with fire, but with breath thinning beneath painted glass, with blood soaking into parchment, with servants folding linen that may never be used, with kings crowned not in gold, but in the colourless light of a dying day, and beyond the stone walls, beneath the black ice of the Thames, the current continues its whisper, carrying secrets downstream, toward the tower, toward the end night presses. Down over Sion Abbey like a velvet pall, thick and unrelenting, its silence pierced only by the faint, bitter breath of the river Brent, winding through frozen reeds. The water murmurs to no one now. Even the birds have ceased their questions dot beyond the walls. The wind combs the moor with silver teeth, and lanterns hanging from the cloister arches sway gently, casting trembling halos that ripple across the wet flagstones. In their flicker, a monk crosses himself, eyes wide as distant hounds cry out from some unseen corner of the earth. Their howls echo like prophecies. No one dares name what they foretell within the guest house. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary, wormwood, and vinegar. The herbs simmer in shallow bowls placed beneath windows and doorways, charms meant to hold back death as if it were a draught or a wandering beggar. The mixture is ancient, passed through mouths that have forgotten where it came from. Yet it burns in the nose and stings the throat. It is not comfort, it is preparation. The tapestries that line the narrow chamber walls, once rich with Vaudois blues and Burgundian gold, now drip with shadow. Beeswax flames from trembling sconces cast soft, distorted light over the woven battles and banquets, but the colours have bled, not faded bled, like wounds that will not close. A knight in gold thread seems to lean forward, sword poised forever. Mid-stroke, frozen in triumph that no longer matters, Henry lies beneath a mantle of fox fur and linen, his body heavy with fever and rot. The leg his legs, the kingdom now, and it is losing. Physicians hover like ravens at the edge of a battlefield. They speak in hushed Latin, dipping goose-feather quills into pots of ox-bile ink, charting the swelling, the pus, the skins. Slow surrender. One adjusts the cloth, another folds a parchment. None look at him for long. The smell is too strong, the failure too intimate. A mallow poultice wilts in a brass bowl nearby, its warmth long gone. Anisette cools in a pewter cup, untouched. The king's face twitches at moments, perhaps from pain, perhaps from dreams. Somewhere behind the haze of fevered eyes, he sees dancers spinning beneath crystal chandeliers. He sees velvet and music and triumph. The court of his youth golden, untouched by time. But the body does not lie. It has become a mausoleum for memory. Down the passage, clerks rush with wax seals and bundles of parchment, Ward Windsor, toward Whitehall, toward history. One drops a scroll and retrieves it with trembling fingers, muttering a prayer not meant to be heard. In another chamber, young Elizabeth stares at a frost-laced window, her breath clouding the glass as she draws invisible lines along the ice feathers. Her fingers hover just above the chill, not quite touching. Her future flickers, their unspoken moth trapped behind crystal, beating its wings against the coming storm. In the kitchens below, barley pottage bubbles in iron pots. A cook adds salt, not for taste, but to preserve, just in case. Another stirs slowly, listening to the scrape of spoon against copper, like it might reveal a secret. They speak in low tones of eclipses and comets, of stars that bled and moons. That vanished. Someone claims they saw an owl circling the abbey tower thrice at dusk. No one questions it. Upstairs, the candle gutters, once then again. Henry stirs. His breath rattles like a chain half buried in snow. No one speaks to him now unless spoken to. Even then, they answer in hushed tones. He is both present and absent king, and corpse in slow arrival. And then it happens, an hour before Lord's, when the abbey should sleep deepest. The great bronze bell tolls, no rope is drawn, no hand moves, it tolls once deep, low and long, as if the abbey itself exhales. The sound spills down the corridors and under the king's door like water, like ink. Henry stirs again. His hand lifts, trembling, toward the sound. His fingers grope at air, at emptiness, as though he might grasp the bell's echo, hold it, command it back into silence. But his hand falls. The bell's note lingers. It blends with the scent of decay, with the hiss of the hearth, with the sharp bite of rosemary in the air. It is not music. It is not alarm. It is simply a presence, one more ancient than kings. Outside the chamber, those who hear it freeze. A monk stops mid-step. A clerk spills his ink. A scullery maid drops a bowl of garlic cloves. And slowly, all of them understand. Something has begun. Not the end, not yet, but the slow, irreversible ascent of the final curtain. The last tableau has not yet arrived, but the stage is preparing itself, darkened, veiled, waiting. Somewhere beyond these walls, horses stamp in readiness. Messengers await torches. But inside, within Sion, time itself holds its breath. Henry does not speak again. His eyes flutter once more, briefly, as if searching for a crown or a name, or a reason. But there is nothing now but breath and shadow, and even those begin to pull apart. The bell tolls no. Second time, it doesn't need to. The silence that follows is louder than any decree he ever issued, and from that silence, the story moves onward, Westminster, toward the vault. A name already carved in stone. Candlelight gathers in the chapel royal like liquid gold, slipping across the black and white stones until it climbs into the mirrored cuirasses of the yeomen. They stand unmoving brazen statues, faces half hidden beneath morion crests. Yet their armor breathes, catching each flicker, each nervous quiver of flame. Between them a thurible swings, its Byzantine chains groaning softly. Frankincense and myrrh spiral upward into the hammer-beam rafters where bats cling in bewildered silence, robbed of any dawn to measure their sleep. The incense hangs heavy, too sweet, as though it tries to outsing the odor drifting from the royal apartments beyond. Upon the altar rests a silver chrism spoon, thin as moonlight, beside a vial of oil blessed for a coronation that may arrive before heartbeats can count it. The spoon gleams with terrifying promise, hope for some, doom for others. A single polished curve holding the weight of a realm dot far above. The palace windows rattle to a deeper thunder Henry's breath. Each labored exhale shakes dust from plaster roses, shakes parchment on music, stands long gone silent. Shakes certainty from men who once thought God himself had chained the future in place. In a pitch-pine chamber, 2 floors away, scribes bend over trestle tables, copying proclamations by candle stubs. Their quills rasp like beetles' wings across vellum. Ships to readiness at Deptford, the words command. Stores gathered, cannon primed. The ink snakes dark and glistening, refusing to dry. For every sentence that calls the navy, 2 arms, another erases an old minister's name struck through, forgotten, expendable. The king's voice erupts again, muffled but immense, rising through the joists like distant artillery. One scribe flinches, his quill snaps, spattering. Ink across the page. The blot spreads in slow petals, echoing the bruise that has risen on England's brow these last bitter weeks. Outside, beneath shuttered windows, gardeners kneel in hard soil. Their breath feathers the night air while they clip early snowdrops, stems brittle with January frost. They remember a spring long ago Henry riding beneath May banners, his destrier tossing a mane of white foam while trumpets gilded the sky. Now they pluck blossoms to cool his sickbed petals, snapping with tiny, mortal clicks. Each flower is a frail spell. Let the fever break, let the king sleep. Let tomorrow exist. Within the privy chamber, Queen Catherine braces a silver ewer against her chest. Barley water sloshes inside, sweetened with hippocras and salt tears. She approaches the bed slowly, mindful of the boards that creak like verdicts. Henry's gaze, glass bright, drifts beyond her to an arras of the harrowing of hell souls, woven in crimson silk, stretched toward Christ's pierced hand. Their faces are contorted, half anguish, half awe. The king stares so intently the tapestry seems to breathe. Perhaps he wonders which grasp will claim him first, the hand that saves, or the darkness that drags. Midnight gathers on the threshold but will not cross. Palace clocks bicker in the upper galleries. One strikes the half, another the quarter, none in agreement. Their quarrelsome clacks spill through corridors like courtiers disputing a will. Even time cannot decide whose side to take. Hooded chamberlains lift their eyes to each passing chime, measuring breaths against brass and iron. What hour is it, truly, when a kingdom hesitates to name it? At last the newest hour collides with itself. One pendulum freezes mid-swing. Its sudden stillness rings louder than any bell. A hush rolls outward through the scriptorium, through the gallery of tapestries, through the gardeners crouched. By the privy plottant, it reaches the chapel royal dot, there. Every candle flares. For a heartbeat, each flame rises tall, then trembles, acknowledging a force beyond walls and flesh. Above the roof, a meteor shears the invisible sky, white and silent, inscribing fate in a language no priest can translate. Its tail glows for less than a breath, yet the chapel feels its stone mortared with prayers quivering beneath celestial ink. The pendulum resumes, though meekly now, as if shamed. Clocks find a new rhythm, but something inside the rhythm is broken, or perhaps freed. The marble tiles beneath the yeoman seem to tilt toward a corridor where no door stands, an unseen path opening, urging footsteps none are ready to take. Catherine turns from the bed, barley water cooling in her hands. She hears the meteor's passage, though she cannot name it. In her mind blooms a memory of hush in a cathedral at dusk, of distant organ notes dissolving into stone. She feels that same dissolution, no music slipping beyond hearing, light slipping beyond sight, power slipping beyond reach. Henry's breath rattles once more, softer than before, as though an anvil lifted from his lungs for the briefest mercy. His eyes close on the scarlet figures of the arras, on the Queen's pale fingers, on the room that will soon forget his shape. Wax drips from a nearby taper, pooling near his hand. It cools, hardens, and keeps its form, a pale, translucent claw, adrift on the cloth, more lasting than the flesh it imitates. Somewhere beyond the chapel, a raven croaks against the eaves. The yeomen do not move. The thurible still smoulders. The chrism spoon still gleams, untouched, UNCHOSEN. And in the hush that follows, the palace seems to lean stone, timber, and breathful, tilting toward that unseen doorway, preparing to follow a king who is not yet past, but toward whom time itself now bows. The night waits, thin-lipped and listening, for the single exhalation that will carry every crown, every charter, every fragile promise into the next uncharted hour.